All right, let's do another segment of tournament style chess problems. All right. So, well, we got to look at the four things: checks, captures, piece contact, board situation. Board situation jumps out at us that we have kind of a nasty setup going here. Wow, really nice, because we have some kind of vicious assault on his king. So it looks like there's a potential we can't do a discovered check, because if we go knight to f5 check, he can just go knight takes bishop. The discovered check has to go to e6 with a double check so we don't lose our bishop. And one of the things that will happen when we play, for example, knight to e6 check, if he goes king e7, we get bishop f8 check, guarded by the knight, which is guarded by the pawn. Really crazy stuff. So, I'm thinking it looks like we might have a knight discovery on the e6 check, followed by either a knight d6 check or a bishop f8 check. So let's look at this. Brute force technique. Knight e6 check. The knight and bishop both cannot be taken because he has to move his king as double check. So knight e6 double check. King to e8. We'd have knight to d6 check. And he has to go to e7. Or he could go to, wait a second, no, that's right. He has to go to e7 because the knight on e6 guards d8. So, go back to move one. Knight to e6, double check. He has two moves. King e8, king e7. So, king e8, knight d6 check, king e7, bishop to f8, checkmate. Fantastic. So, knight e6 check, king to e7 now. Let's go bishop to f8 check. King to e8, knight d6. Yeah, he's mated. This is an absolute mate. It's just that easy sometimes. Now, it wasn't, for me, too difficult to spot. To me, I would think the difficulty of this problem lies in the kind of the goofy formation of the minor pieces, and just, you got to be double sure. You got to double check your work. All right, let's go see what happens here. Now, in my other videos, you guys who have been around will recognize my gut reaction is always turn the piece endgame into a pawn endgame. So both have 5 pawns. So my gut reaction is to beat the guy in a king and pawn ending. So knight takes knight, king takes knight. Now black needs to do what? So at that point, we have a protected passer on d5. The key thing, good question. So really, if you look at it, the pawns on the king side, on the F and G files, pretty much don't do anything. The action, whatever action there's going to be, lives on the queen side. So my gut reaction, this is the, I'm going to do a visual helper here. If I planned this out in advance, it'd be a lot smoother. What are you going to do? So when I do these videos, here's the secret. I just do it off the cuff. It's all improv. So you see, I'll use my dad's old chess book. Those don't even count. So that's what I do. I'm a wacko. So if we look at this guy, knight takes knight, king takes knight, I'm thinking a5. Because those pawns on the king side don't do anything. a5 the obvious response is if he takes the pawn, pawn takes pawn, we go king to a4, and we're going to clean the a pawns and just cash this so easily with the d5 passer. So taking for him is really not helpful. So we go knight takes knight, king takes knight, a5. Again, if he moves his king, then he's going to have a problem. We're just going to go and bully his a pawn. Pardon me. So let's look at that for a second. Knight takes knight, king takes knight, a5, I don't know, king c7. So you'd have a takes b6, king takes b6. What if we go king to a4? He could play a5. No, it's not that obvious. The question becomes, yeah, that's the thing. Ding, ding, that doesn't work. So, king c7. If he goes that, sorry, that's king to f2. It's not an a pawn. Sorry, I'm looking at it backwards. Happens from time to time. So it's knight takes knight, king takes knight. It's h4. So h4. Right, if he goes king f2, king to h5. I'm sorry, it's h takes g3, king takes g3, king h5. And if he plays h4, then you play e3. And so we're going to win the h pawn. You play like something like king f3, king takes h4, king takes e3. And the problem he runs into is that he can't defend the f pawn. I'm convinced this is winning. That was the other move that was obviously winning for us. Katinga. He can only get in the square of one of those pawns and capture it, and then the other one's gone, as you see. So let's look at this again. This is the dilemma after h3, is that if he goes after the h pawn, you just play e3 check, and there's nothing he can do. This is an old fundamental. This, in fact, was something I saw right from the very beginning. I didn't think he would play this because this is an obvious loss if you've done the homework. So the point of h4 is that g4 is an obvious loss. But you have to have done the homework to see that this is an obvious loss. That's why I was calculating either g takes, which is an obvious loss because of king to h5. You're going to clean both of these pawns. This protected passer is never going to be threatened. So clearly g takes h loses. So king to f2, pawn takes, king takes, king to h5. And whatever happens, as soon as our king touches this pawn, we'll jettison the e pawn, capturing this and move to a position where he cannot defend the f pawn. Because we'll be able to move to g3, attacking the f pawn. He'd go to e3, and then we'd go king to g4, and he's going to have to jettison the f pawn. This was the key thing. So there's 3 different ways this can go. All of them lose. But this is the kind of stuff you have to look at, because king and pawn ending this is a super important one, actually. So my gut reaction was the correct one. I want to transform these to king and pawn endings because you just maximize your winning ability if you have done your king and pawn ending homework. That h4 is just a crusher. And like I said, this is an obvious win. Now he can't take the d pawn because you play not takes pawn, which would win too, actually. G takes h3 would win. He cashes to stop him, and we'd win because this is the distant passer. We're going to eat this guy, and then we'll kill these. But g3 would be even better. But you really can't lose this. King takes d5 loses primarily to g3, and even g takes h3 wins. Just a little sloppier. So it doesn't really matter. But these are all things you have to know, all this stuff. It all comes from, and I pound it every time I do a king and pawn endgame, the square of the pawn. There's the square of the pawn, the protected passed pawn, which the D pawn used to be. But he cannot allow us to make another protected passer. That would be just devastating. So when he does this, he's in the square before you push the H pawn. He's in the square of both pawns. Now if it's white to move, he wins. He takes, and then this pawn is toast. But it's not his move, it's our move. You lose. H3. He can't get both of them. He can get one. Just one of those things. So this problem's lesson is to go back and play through each one of these sequences. All right? This is a super problem because this is like 3 problems in one. You get 3 lessons for the price of 1. Only here on YouTube. So H4 is the killer. Set this up on a board for yourself and run through it. H4 is winning because you're going to create, and you might want to write this down. Get a piece of paper, draw yourself a board, and just file this away because this is useful stuff to look back at. This formation, these pawns over here, like I said, they don't count. That's why I used my dad's old tournament chess collection of, it's a collection of his games. I used that to block off the board because that E file and to the right doesn't matter. This is all right here on these 4 files. So H4, I'm sorry, not E. I keep going backwards. Ugh. D, it's D to A, doesn't matter. So H4 crushes because it undermines the pawn chain. The old Nimzovich rule, undermine the pawn chain. But we hit this guy. Doesn't matter. He can defend it on F2. He can push it to G4. He can capture on H4. You have to understand all 3 of those. Right? And the 4th one is if he pushes on G4, which is what happened. We capture. That creates a 4th scenario where he captures on D5 and also loses. So there's 4 instructive scenarios here, all of which are winning for black. And you've got to go through this and look through these. You guys are super lucky because you get to see all 4 of these in one swoop. Myself, in the ancient days of the 80s, had to learn these, one by one by one by one, and not structured like I'm doing it for you here. So you guys are getting it faster. The key is you gotta get it. Doesn't matter how you get it. I got it bit by bit by bit by bit. You guys get 4 for 1. It's fantastic. So that's the scenario here, and that's why you need to go through this. This is super powerful, as you see, because when this problem started, I just, looked at this, and this automatically was looking great for me. All right, we'll move to the next one. Another endgame, fantastic. Now, what is this guy trying to do? He looks like he's trying to checkmate me. Okay, so yeah, the gut reaction to this is that, well, we'd like to play rook g2 check, and he's going to play king to what, f6, threatens a mate. Bishop g5 check, he's still threatening the same mate because he goes king to e6. Because that bishop nastily, normally the king is covering this g7, but this bishop nastily covers it when his king is here. So, the other idea, oh, actually it's not a mate threat anymore. Yeah, bishop to g5 is a mistake. Look at this. We can go rook g2 check, king f6, he's not threatening mate. Okay, what happened there was that my SD card got full and KO'd. So I figured, you know what, I'll just go and solve it while the clock is running and come back and show you the solution. Which, you know, you see 218 over here. Not too bad. It wasn't too difficult, but it was a little more to it than I was originally anticipating. But that's okay. So, anyway, like I said, we can go rook to g2 check. King f6 is not a mate threat, because if he tries to mate us, we have rook to g8. So this was the correct move, because this facilitates queening the pawn. So he goes bishop to g3, not even you know, trying for a checkmate, which we got that covered, so that doesn't matter. That's not a mistake by white. That is the best move. He can't checkmate us by force. So now you could always screw up. That's another story. So hey, he's not threatening to stop me. I'm going to queen this pawn. Well, and it's like, okay. He's like, check. I dare you to queen it. I'm like, good point there. Now, at this point, you have two choices: king g8 or king to e8. Which one would you choose? You might want to pause the video, and we'll be right back. Okay, we're back. So, what did you choose? Did you choose king to g8? Because king to g8 is an inferior move. He gets a free one. He can play like rook to b7, threatening to checkmate us, and also getting back to the first rank to defend. So if you chose rook to king to g8, you were wrong. It's okay. Everybody makes those mistakes, but I'm explaining to you why it's the bad move so that you understand, oh, it's not just a bad move. You'll understand why. So I looked at this, I go, dude, king g8, he's going to threaten to checkmate me. And what I told you, you know, to go and defend. So king to e8, correct move. But if someone doesn't explain this move to you, it's harder for you to learn. But now you'll know it forever, so that's cool. Now, he's got, what does he have? I don't even remember what he did. Rook to f3, threatening my bishop. Well, hey, Sonny, this game is about queening this pawn. It's not about rook takes bishop. So he makes what I call a ghost threat. He's got a ghost threat against your bishop, because if he plays rook takes bishop, pawn equals queen. I get queen for bishop. That's a good deal, don't you think? So this is the key thing. Sometimes players make threats that aren't real threats. This is a ghost threat of rook takes bishop. But we can't play f1 because he'll play rook takes queen. So we have to make this a ghost threat. Well, it already is a ghost threat. He can never take it because we just queen. But I'm like, well, I want to force the queen. So let's go rook to g1. Surprise, surprise, surprise. That's the correct move. It's not a surprise to me. Now I'm going to force that queen. So it doesn't really matter. He's dust at this point. He breaks the pin. He's threatening bishop takes pawn. Yeah, good luck with that. I make a queen. Give me a rook. He gives me the rook. I take it. We win. Okay. Now this is a little more difficult in the context of it's a chain of events. Let's go back. Let's go back. And the chain of events is we're going to clear the road for the pawn to queen. All right, rook g2 check, bishop to g3. We don't even have to worry about the mate threat because he chose to defend it properly, but it still fails. So now we have cleared the road for the pawn. Step 2 is push the pawn, which then he comes up with a killer move, rook f7 check. Once again, he offers us a chance to blow it. King g8 is a mistake, but we're too smart for that. We understand why this would be a mistake in advance, because we don't want him playing like rook to b2 followed by king to b1, and he's gonna stop our pawn and we're in trouble. We're too smart for that. King e8. You know, it's the same as he moves with a tempo. His tempo is the threat of checkmate. So we're good. Now we're threatening to work our way forward and cash this pawn. The thing is, his king can't move away from the bishop pin. The bishop is not helping him because it's pinned by our rook. But he can't move his king away because our king would eat his rook. All right? So he has to come up with, you know, another move. Rook f3 looks good. You know, it is good because it gets out of the grasp of our king, but the threat of our king taking rook was enough to cause him to waste the tempo to go rook to f3 with this ghost threat. That lower ranked players, we go, oh, he's going to take my bishop. Okay? People who are not aware that that's a ghost threat. So today you learned about ghost threats. So that's awesome. So now we're going to say, hey, here's the, you know, here's a free bishop. You know, it's a free bishop for you. You want to take it, buddy? He's like, no, I really don't want to take that. I'm like, yeah, you don't. Okay. So again, the threat that our king had on his rook forced him to move the rook, which allows us to move the rook, maintaining the pin on the bishop, and now threatening the queen. So these moves all have a specific function. We're not just grabbing a bag and pulling a rook move out of the bag or whatever. It was like this guy that I have met on YouTube. Yeah, I made a comment on one of his videos, and it's really a great comment because it never occurred to me to use the phrase that I did. You know, I told him, you know, chess is not a random bag. Chess, you know, chess is like surgery. Every move is pre-planned if you're a good player. So what we did, we had sequential elements. We pushed the pawn. We moved the rook to g1 to support the queening of the pawn. He moved out of the way. We queened the pawn. Crunch, as I like to say. So that was awesome. Yeah, you know, it's another 3 in a row. But these problems were awesome today because of the things you got to see. This problem was a killer problem. The problem with the knights we turned into a pawn endgame was fantastic. Which problem was this one? This was the first one. Oh, this was the double check problem. Man, these were 3 awesome problems. So that was a 2200, the double check problem. What's the second one? The second one was a 2013 easy endgame for me. And this one, 2112. Ooh, like Rush. Awesome. So you just saw me crush those 3 problems like they were nothing. But we do this tournament style. You got to do this mentally and make your decisions before you touch the pieces. This is the key. I did really focus in on the 4 techniques of checks, captures, piece contact, and board position, because all of these were board position problems really. And so I went to board position first. I mean, I know I mentioned the order one time until just now. So go over these problems. These are a gold mine. These are a gold mine of information, things you're going to have to be able to do or understand. And once you understand them, today or tomorrow or whatever it is. But the day from which you understand them, they start percolating in your brain over time, so that when you reach similar positions in your games, you can draw back. Oh yeah, I remember that, end game problem. Now you won't remember that specific night end game problem as such for more than a week or two, maybe a month if you're lucky. But it's the lesson of the pawn structures and the pushing of the pawns that will stay with you, even though where you learned it won't really stay with you for the most part. There's a few that will, in your life that you'll remember some and not others, and that's fine. Don't worry about that. It's the gathering of the techniques that you need, not so much where you got them. So, like the video, leave me a comment, tell me how much this helped you. Subscribe so you get the information directly. Tell your friends, but don't tell your enemies, because they'll use my lessons against you. You guys know what to do. I'll talk to you later.